Good morning and welcome to our message for what is the fifth Sunday in Lent. And this morning we have heard the passage from Ezekiel, his Valley of Dry Bones vision. And it's such a great vision. We can all imagine it as we read through the story. You can imagine that Ezekiel is standing in this desert valley full of dry bones. And I believe that there have been battles through Israel's history where there are places like this. They would have known valleys or fields that were essentially full of bones after a war or a battle, and the bodies had been left. Bleached and baked by the sun, the bones stand scattered all around him. But he is placed there listening to the words of the Lord. As we progress through this time of Lent, these 40 days to live simply, to be inspired and to give, it would be a valuable time for us to consider what the dry bones and dry times represent in our own spiritual journey, in our own spiritual lives. And what can we learn from the lonely and the parched periods of our journey? The dark night of the soul is a phrase that's often used in literature, but it's familiar to human experience. Most of us can point to a time in our lives when doubts or hopelessness, depression, fear, and anxiety were prominent in the day-to-day living. These days in our current community are full of that kind of hopelessness and despair. And it's just like the people of Israel. At the time when Ezekiel had this vision, they were despairing. They had lost their hope of ever being able to return to the goodness of freedom, the goodness of living in the promised land, of being able to worship God freely. They had given up that hope and felt that they were in the pit of despair. And here we stand reading this passage in a time when our whole community is in this uncertainty of lockdown, partial lockdown, sickness. Maybe we'll avoid the sickness. How many will get it? What will the damage be? We are in one of those dry periods where our life may seem as disconnected and as brittle as the bones in Ezekiel's vision. I want to read you a poem. Thought it was interesting that Pete also felt that poetry spoke loudly at this time. This is a poem called Bone. Bone lay scattered and artifactual, windrowed like dead branches, whose tree bodies repeat the desiccation. All hope bleached and lost, living moisture evaporated, calcified memories of what was, or seeds of what could be, wandering shards of vessels that once thrummed with pure energy where honour and dishonour wrestled, stripped of living water to walk the hills, needing only gravity to line the valley. It was never about the bones anyway, rather a glimpse of pure power, a reminder of who's in charge of restoration. Real hope lies in the source. By Dempsey R. Calhoun. Often reflections on this passage of Ezekiel, all sorts of reflections, but particularly sermons, seem to jump very quickly to the renewal and the resurrection, the new life of these bones brought back to life, and we jump there too quickly. The temptation is to get to the good bits as fast as possible without looking for the lessons that are buried in the dry and barren landscape. Maybe the question for us in this time of Lent, in this time of prayer and fasting, is this: what can you learn about yourself and your relationship with the world from the painful and the difficult times, from those uncomfortable paths that you have already walked and been through and survived? Do you have that message of hope already in you? Do you know the source of that life-giving wind? It's wonderful to grab hold of the vision of the life-giving wind that breathes into those inanimated bodies and give them life. But how more powerful when you know the source of that life-giving wind? The life that sustained you through difficult times, that brought you to new life when you were nothing but dry bones. If you have that hope, if you know that one, our Creator and our Lord, it seems to me that we are in the kind of times when our entire community needs to hear, needs to know, needs to be pointed to that source. Our hope in difficult times is not in ourselves. It's not, well, we won't get sick, we're strong or well or young or fit or isolated. It's not, we will never have that happen to us, but rather our hope is in the source of the power to restore, the power to heal, the power to make whole, the source of the breath of life, and the only one who can bring us home.